Why do we play Dungeons & Dragons? Or any role-playing game for that matter? Well, I think it all comes down to, well, besides escapism, being heroic. You know, there's not a lot of chances to be heroic in this day and age. We can't slay the dragon, so to speak. We can't really go on an adventure. And sure, they're romanticized in both stories and D&D, but still, that's exciting. There's something in us that wants to be brave, that wants to be heroic. Now, the Merriam-Webster's 1913 dictionary, the Superior Dictionary, defines heroic as such: worthy of a hero, bold, daring, brave, illustrious, as heroic action, heroic enterprises. And that's it. Dungeons & Dragons is a series of heroic enterprises, of running into the orc horde, sneaking past the Balrog to get gold, of saving the blacksmith's daughter from the goblins. A series of heroic enterprises. How wonderful. And with this too, if you play 5th edition, which most people do, most people play super heroic games, where without thought, you accomplish, you do these heroic actions. And, you know, while thought and planning it goes into really any fight or any encounter, to some extent on the player's part, at least when I was playing, and I'm sure many other people feel this way, I never thought about death. I knew I wasn't going to die as a player character. And after some time, the game got really boring. I realized that, well, despite my heroism, does it really mean anything? Is it being heroic if I know I'm not going to die when I teleport into the kobolds and cast Fireball centered on myself? No, it doesn't. And that changed me. That changed my DMing style. I now roll all my dice in front of my players. Everyone has low HP. I mean, I made my own custom system. That's a mixture of basic, advanced, and the original white box Dungeons & Dragons. I wanted things to be simpler. I wanted death to be on the table. Unlike in 5th edition where you get your death saves and someone most likely gets you up with a bonus action when you reach 0 HP. In my game, much like older editions, when you reach 0 HP, you're dead. You're done.
Dunzo?
Suddenly, being a hero requires thought. And it is heroic, because your life is on the line when performing said heroic actions. So let's talk about this. I'm known as a fairly hard DM. In fact, I asked a few of my players what they thought about my game, and it was much nicer than what I thought. I didn't hear the word killer DM passed around. But to give you an idea, these are some comments made by my players who, jeepers, we're reaching just about 3 years of a campaign now. One of them says, I would say you have a general emphasis on realism, also a heavy focus on dice rolls. Not the type of GM to run a heroic fantasy game, so you would be quite off-putting to any 5e only players. But if a player is looking for a nerve-wracking / intense, more realistic level of risk, and a super high accomplishment level game, it's right up their alley. Another one says, I'd say that we're very much playing on hard mode. However, that comes with even more joy when you actually accomplish things. And then the final one describes my game and myself as, quote, like a giant rat man that pulls you into his charismatic spell. Ruthless, but also lets cool things happen if they sound dope. My other group also said some things, though this one's reaching just about a year now. And while I unfortunately can't fully quote two of them for very specific reasons, one of my players from that group says, quote, baller AF, deep world building, roleplay heavy, real consequences, sandbox, brutal combat, gripping stories, excellent characters. What time are we meeting on Sunday for D&D? I don't mess around. And despite my emphasis on death, despite it happening fairly often in my games, players stick around. They like it. And so, today, I want to give you all some ideas, something to percolate in your head, to maybe make you think a little more about character death in your games. And as an early warning system, I'm not a big fan of 5e, and this does not work well in 5e. Trust me, I've tried. 5e is a very super heroic game, and it's... Now, the first thing that I want to discuss regarding death is that death is a consequence. It's a real consequence, and it lends the game weight. You know? Traps are designed to kill, not annoy. Skeletons can and will kill characters, and you're probably only safe when you're maybe level 4 from being one-shot by them. You and the enemy, the monsters, have very low HP. And beyond that too, in my game, you level up through gold and treasure, and you get very little XP from combat. You know, I want to encourage players to be smart. But that's it. Death is what lends all of this weight. Do we fight? Or do we sneak around? Or do we even run? When death is on the table, players weigh these options, discuss them, and make intelligent options around it. Not saying that they don't in games like 5e where you're super heroic, but I'm not gonna lie, I never felt like death was on the table, even when making our plans, so I was fine with anything happening. And I'm sure a lot of people are that way too, where you kind of mindlessly go through the motions. In any case. So you may also wonder to yourself, so a character dies. What does that player do for the rest of the session then? Well, I killed two birds with one stone. What do D&D players, and by extension, GMs, like to do the most? I would argue it's make characters. Listen, there are people, they don't even play D&D. They just make characters and plan out like a leveling progression for them. What do D&D players talk about after playing with their characters? You know, they're for like 5 sessions, they're like, oh, I had this idea for a new character. I can't wait to play him. And then, you know, a little while later, they'll come up with a new character. So, I've allowed my players to play multiple characters at once. Shocking, horrific, I know. But here's the thing, you know, the original D&D system was for, 5 to 50 players because it was based off of a war game. You're not playing Gimli, you're not playing Gandalf. You're just playing a random foot soldier. You are not inherently a heroic character. You're just some guy. But with that, too, the still, you know, instinct of, ooh, I like making characters, I like this takes over. And it's very simple to make characters, and by extension, they're extremely simple to play because they don't have a whole bushel full of abilities. They maybe have 1 or 2 if they're lucky. I do other things too to make character creation a little more interesting, but our players love it. 2 of them in particular like went insane-o style, and over one weekend, they rolled up some insane, like 100 characters. Because the way you do is, you know, you roll your stats straight down. 3d6, that first 3d6 goes into strength. You don't get to choose where they are. And that brings us into something else, too. In character creation, you occasionally come up with some amazing character with amazing stats, but most of your characters suck. They're not great. And so this leads into how you keep the characters you like alive. And by extension, how I taught my players how to engage in medieval warfare without directly telling them to do this. You know, I give the general advice on how to fight, but they do this on their own naturally. They keep their good characters, their strong ones, the really cool ones they rolled up, heavily armored, and in the back of the party. And out front, they send the chaff sucky characters. Chaff sucky characters run in, tank hits, maybe dish out a few before dying, and then the strong armored characters come in and mop up the rest of the mobs. It's very amusing. But through this, characters survive, they grow, and as time goes on, they gain more and more personality. Because that's another thing too. At most, I'll allow like 3 bullet points for character background, and if you reach level 3, I'll let you have more and more. But because of this, it's extremely natural how characters grow too. Because, well, you discover their personalities in the dungeon. And with this too, there is a learning curve to all this. You'll have a lot of characters die in my games in the beginning, but eventually, you really do start to get really good at combat and not die. And this also makes you sneaky, makes you devious. My players, especially my 3-year group, they're veterans of the Long War. They know when to run, but they also know when to fight. And when they do fight, they do it extremely well. There was a point for almost a half a year or something where they didn't lose any characters. They were just going frickin' insane-o style on the monsters, and it was wonderful to watch. And this is all due to the rule system I'm using being a mishmash, my own. It's mostly rulings over rules, you know? I arbitrate the game. If they want to do something cool, if they want to fill their inventory with various items that may be combat tricks, or to help them get over a trap and not die, to explore a dungeon, well, they don't have a lot of innate abilities to help them, unless you're a thief, but, you know, thieves suck until they're high level. But, they'll fill their inventories with stuff, and they'll ask me, hey, can we do this? Can we do this? And it's not in the rules. The rules don't cover if you can do any of this. But I'll arbitrate and go, oh, that sounds neat, or, oh yeah, no, you're saying that in the middle of combat, you kind of want you and this other guy to, like, hold two ends of a rope and kind of, you know, run close to the ground and try to trip the orcs in the room? Yeah, I'll have them make saves. That sounds really cool. You both can do that on any turn. Heck yeah. You know, there's lots of cool things like that, and it's wonderful. And with that, too, it also makes them pay attention for opportunities, or, if the battle's going south, to run. Now, talking, though, about characters that have survived, you know, with how deadly things are, like, goodness, critical hits can chop off limbs, but they can also chop off player limbs. I have this small crit table. I'll post it next to me somewhere, but it's brutal. And so, some of the surviving characters are scarred and deformed. They show that they've been through a lot and survived, and it's really neat. Like, Kobe, I think, is the first example that comes to mind. So he's a cleric of Axis, and he was missing an arm for a very long time until he managed to get a magical replacement, which was very, 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 very difficult to acquire. Magic isn't everywhere in my game, except the dungeons. They have a lot of magic items. Give good rewards if your game's dangerous. That's another note, too. Pardon my ramble, but I give very good rewards. My players will say so. But anyway, Kobe, missing an arm, finally got a replacement. Recently, he barely survived falling in acid, and despite being healed after falling in, the attack on his life left him
scarred and deformed.
And now he's absolutely hideous looking. It's really cool. And there are a bunch of other scars and a bunch of other characters, too. And last session, right? 2 longtime characters died. Beloved, wonderful characters. Stramer, the fighter, with his shovel, his sharpened shovel, and Braun, the ranger, with a very, very mysterious, etheric backstory. And it was a shock. But here's the thing. Their deaths, especially Braun's death, were heroic. They were at the bottom of the dungeon fighting an extremely, extremely powerful monster. And the monster had a cone-shaped attack, right? And it dealt quite a bit of damage. 46 times 2 to flesh, I think? And of course, they're all made of flesh. So, he fires, he hits, and he's going to hit Merlin, who's like a level 11 wizard. He's no longer a magic user. He's gained the title of wizard, and he's extremely powerful, but he's still fragile. And, unfortunately, poor Braun is caught in the blast. But Braun says, well, I have an ability that says I can tank the damage for a character that's within 5 feet of me. Can I just tank the entire shot? Like, right to my face and just die so Merlin lives? So the player playing Braun did not also play Merlin. It was one of the other guys at the table. So of course I said, yeah, you can do that. So he ended up sacrificing himself completely. And, while he was going to die anyway, still, the fact he even thought to do that, in the context of the game, that is heroic. Super heroic to essentially sacrifice yourself to shield another one of your party members. Take the shot and die for them. At the bottom of the dungeon, facing down this strong monster. Wow. That's fantastic. That's wonderful. That is heroism. Going into these dungeons and fighting these powerful monsters and potentially putting your life on the line. Going in to save your companions or maybe even a missing child. That is suddenly heroic, considering something down there might just frickin' one-shot you. You might die doing it. But because you did it in, the service of another person, to protect them, to help them, wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And the thing is, most deaths in the game aren't glamorous, Being ripped apart by zombies, cut in half by a swinging pendulum trap, a poison arrow maybe. Not glamorous, but it makes the deaths that are heroic. The characters that stay behind to block off the hallway with 2 shields and die in the process so everyone else gets away. Heroic. It's wonderful. It is wonderful. And there are many other examples of heroic moments I can list in my games. In summary, my world, my D&D world, it's bloody, and people die. Adventurers especially, they seek treasure, wealth, and knowledge, and delve into deep, dark places to find it. But those who delve into those deep, dark places, well, inherently they're putting themselves on the line to get it. There's a reason why, a peasant doesn't go down there to seek wealth. They're most likely going to die. But the ones who live, the adventurers who live, their actions are heroic. And brave, It's never the ones you expect to live. Valrin, a once humble blacksmith turned mercenary turned player character. Alive with a magical helm, a blade that can slice a man in half with one hit, and a enchanted cloak that allows him to phase through walls. Kobe, the once bright-eyed cleric of Axis who is scarred and deformed but has a hand that's magic and made of crystal that can crush a man's throat. Gleaming magical armor, along with a linked mace that can slay the undead. Or Baggins, the always deplorable and insane thief who has become this horrific abomination of earth and flesh, who now can slaughter entire villages on his own, and has done so on several occasions, but still returns to his lich master to be rewarded for his efforts. There are so many more characters I could name who were nothing, and through their adventures, through living, through being smart, through getting treasure, through being deformed, have become incredible, who have become legendary for their exploits. As Gary Gygax, the co-founder of D&D, said in the Advanced D&D DM's Guide, there must be some final death, or immortality will take over, and again, the game will become boring. While perhaps not one of the flashiest quotes in the Advanced D&D DM's Guide, which is, by the way, a fantastic resource, it is very true. The moment you allow one character to escape death, it cascades, as people will cite that, and suddenly no one can die, and the stakes lower, and the game becomes more and more boring, because, well, what are you risking? I think we're gonna end my long rant here on dying for now. Next week, I'm gonna make a companion video where I discuss how story can occur in a game where characters die often, because that seems rather counterintuitive, and I had an interesting conversation with someone that made me think about all this. So we'll discuss that next time. But in the meantime, if you want to talk to me about D&D or painting or hobbying or FTL or whatever you're here for, look down below. I have my Discord. You can join that to chat with me freely. But otherwise, thank you very much for watching. I have other D&D videos you can go watch if you want. Hack the algorithm! Consider subbing! But with that, thank you very much for watching. And I hope to see you all in the next video!